And Zach Osterman joins us from the Indy Start.
How we doing?
How are you, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, got a little echo there, I think. But how are you doing, buddy?
Oh, I can't complain. How about you?
Good. I see you got the. Was that one of those new shirts that you're wearing that I saw with Bob Knight?
No, this is ATL versus all y'all.
I was gonna say that would have been surprising of me, but
I got
the colors.
I got this somewhere during the World Series run last year. So
I could only see the top, and it's the exact color scheme. So crazy. What's new with you? How been the holiday seasons? Oh, you got the holidays with the kids. How was that?
Yeah, it's been quiet. Well, as quiet as it can be with the kids. It's been relatively straightforward, I would say. Yeah, just it's nice to have this. On the one hand, December was a lot busier than it's been in the past because we kind of traded the Crossroads for a road trip to Kansas and the Vegas and Rutgers and all that. But on the other hand, it's been nice to have this. Selfishly, this time with just absolutely no IU sports to kind of unwind and relax. I know the women were back at it last night, but just to I think from the 23rd to the 29th, really nothing going on.
Yeah, it's been a weird kind of a deal, but it is what it is. But the Indiana picking up play again next week, and I was looking at the schedules. It's weird. Iowa's schedule is so weird. Indiana had those 2 Big Ten games back a few weeks, 3 weeks ago, and then Iowa just played their first Big Ten game at Nebraska, and then they have 3 this week, or have 3 this week total. It's crazy. I'm not understanding what the scheduling is. I thought the Big Ten was doing that, but I don't know if the schools have more play into that, and if so, why are they playing Big Ten games in December if you don't have to?
Yeah, I mean, I looking at Iowa's schedule, my best guess is just that they wanted to fit Iowa State in, and they wanted to fit that rivalry in. So I mean, there's there's always little bits and pieces that you can ask for. I mean, I remember. Archie Miller's first season, Indiana kind of went to ESPN in the Big Ten and said, listen, just with the way the games fall, we've got this Louisville series, you're going to send us but that's going to be on the road this year. You're going to send us on the road for the Gavitt games. We've got Notre Dame and Indianapolis. We really need a marquee home game. Is there any way that we can, if anybody remembers, Indiana hosted North Carolina in 2016-17 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, and then hosted Duke in the same event the next year. That was Indiana kind of going to the organizers, again, ESPN and the conference, and saying, is there any way we can get a home game 2 years in a row? Because we just don't have a quality home game on the schedule in the non-conference, and we want to make sure we have that for our fans. And, ESPN said, sure, but, it's going to have to be Duke then. It's going to have to be Indiana-Duke is what you're going to have to take. So there can always be a little bit of play in those things, just a little bit of wiggle room. I don't think it's something where you can come back, year after year after year after year. But, my best guess is looking at Iowa's schedule. My best guess would be that they wanted to fit that Iowa State game in. They also played Duke on December 6th, and that was in New York. I'm assuming that was the Jimmy V Classic. And so, you had the Duke game. You had the ACC Big Ten Challenge game against Georgia Tech. A week later, you had Duke. Then you fit Iowa State in literally 2 days later. My best guess is they just kind of moved that game around to squeeze that in.
And, Zach, one of the things we've been talking about is this Indiana's going to have this kind of long
Zach, can we get you to turn your volume down a little bit? We're getting a really bad echo.
There you go.
Perfect. So one of the things is they've got kind of this long layoff. They've had some struggles recently. They obviously didn't come out of the gate very well against Arizona, fought and clawed back into that game. Against Kansas, they had struggles throughout the course of the entire 40 minutes. Didn't look that great against Kennesaw State. I understand, Trace Jackson Davis wasn't playing. Xavier Johnson is obviously hurt. But what areas have you seen where this team needs to improve and really focus on during this 2-week break until they go on the road to Iowa City?
Yeah, I've talked about this, on our podcast or just when people have asked, radio shows and things. And I always kind of pivot back to this this answer that I've got that is essentially just sort of like, I recognize that it's not a good journalist answer because it's not one that I can back up with reams of facts. I think if you look at the way that the season's played out so far, if we were judging Indiana through the prism of where they were a year ago, we would say it's been fine. Okay, they weren't ready for Kansas, they weren't ready for Arizona, but they've got a couple nice wins. That Nebraska win quietly keeps getting better. I mean, Nebraska's 77 in KenPom. It's still a quad 2 win. Nebraska's going to have to do some work at this point for it not to be a quad 2 win. And that says something when it's Nebraska at home. Not even Nebraska on the road, but Nebraska at home. But it's because we as the media, or if you're looking at it as a fan, or you're looking at it as an interested Big Ten observer, we raised the bar on Indiana this year. And Indiana invited that. There's been an awful lot of in the frustration sort of after some of these losses, there's been an awful lot of oh, you, the media, you did this. You rose expectations too high. They invited this stuff. They talked about wanting to be a Big Ten favorite, wanting to compete for a Big Ten title, wanting to compete deep into the NCAA tournament. And I'm not saying they can't still do it. It's December 30th. There's this, it's really easy. College basketball is an easy sport to get doom and gloom about because they're, you especially in November and December, you play a lot of these games that kind of happen in isolation where you play one big game, then you don't play another one for 2 weeks, and then you don't play another one for 9 days. And so when one goes bad, it sort of festers on you for a while. I still think this team's ceiling is there, even potentially with Xavier Johnson out for a while. But I think I don't think they know how to win at the level that they want to win. And they don't know, a long time ago I was talking to somebody about Premier League soccer, and they said the difference between a Premier League player and a player 1 or 2 divisions down in England isn't skill, isn't oh my God, look at that thing that he can do that no one else can do. It's that the Premier League player can do it 19 times out of 20 or 29 times out of 30 or 39 times out of 40. It's not the skill to be able to do it. It's the consistency with which you can do it over and over and over again. And every time you try it, it works. And every time that's what sets you apart. And I think that what where Indiana is right now, I think they've shown the skill. That the Xavier win keeps holding up. North Carolina has quietly rallied pretty nicely from they were kind of in a little bit of a dip, but they're back to 20th in KenPom. They've won 4 in a row. But when you look at these, when you look at these losses, Rutgers, it was offensive rebounding and finishing around the rim, dealing with Rutgers defense. Arizona, it was stopping Arizona offensively and offensive rebounds. Kansas, it was a lot of things, but I think primarily turnovers. The point is, it's not like there's 1 or 2 common threads that you can say are just Achilles heels for this team. And that can be difficult because then you don't have something to attack. But it can be an advantage because I think it comes back to a more fundamental issue, which is more just that this team doesn't seem to understand yet exactly what it takes to win at the level that it wants to, how consistent it has to be in its performances, that there can't be nights off, there can't be slow starts, there can't be, we're just going to be overwhelmed by the moment and too lax with the ball or too weak on defense. Now, there's a couple things here. I don't think there's a team in the Big Ten as good as Kansas or Arizona. Maybe Purdue. I mean, give Purdue its credit. Give Purdue credit for what it's done. I'm not trying to start a fight between IU and Purdue fans here, but I don't think Purdue is as overwhelming offensively as Arizona, and I don't think Purdue can do to Indiana defensively what Kansas did, which is just flood passing lanes with length and wingspan, and just take Indiana out of its offense because they are so long everywhere. Even if we put Purdue in that category, that means there's 12 other Big Ten teams that aren't nearly as good as either of these teams we're talking about. Rutgers obviously is maybe where you get a little bit more concerned, but I just think that this is a team that is still trying to figure out how to win at the level that it wants to. We've talked before about, this was a group we talked all last year about how they'd never been to the NCAA tournament, any of them. Well, now we're talking about a group that's never won at the level that they're talking about, any of them. And it's going to take a little while. And I think that there is a world where some of these growing pains in November and December can potentially, for a team that's basically is favored to win three of its first four games out of the Big Ten break and is looking at two of those four as basically toss-up games, a 1-point win at Iowa, a 1-point loss at Penn State. I think there's a world where this team can come out of this break better, stronger, tougher. Again, even without Xavier Johnson, they'll miss him, but they are at least fortunate. Most teams don't have two good Big Ten quality point guards. They've at least got somebody else to take up that role. I think there's a world where Indiana can, still be a Big Ten contender, but they have gotten a long look at their flaws. I think the most fundamental one just being the need to understand, what it takes night in, night out to win 15 games in the Big Ten. How do they come out of this break, in terms of how they've improved? I think that's the big question.
So
the reason I left it, I'm sorry, Dustin, the reason I left this question up there was because it was kind of right relative to what Zach was talking about. No, I don't think it was a fluke last year because they have the talent. I think it's about the effort. They gave that effort during that period. They fought Michigan and Illinois and even Iowa, but they were able to do that in back-to-back days. And to do that over weeks, that's something we're not seeing from them. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, the winning part of it. And I agree. So I don't think it was a fluke personally, but I think that until they learn that's the effort they have to put out every game, not just 3 days in a row, that they're not going to really take that next step up. I'm sorry, Dustin, go ahead, buddy.
What I was going to ask is to the point of the consistency and knowing what it takes to win. I mean, this is maybe still oversimplifying it, but is it as simple as somebody being a leader in that locker room, somebody stepping up and taking control of that locker room?
I think
I'm not saying they don't have a leader, but if I don't know how to address that question. To me, there's maybe not quite that understanding, and to me that speaks more to leadership, whether that's a coach, a player. I don't know who it is or where it comes from.
I think I think it's leadership in a sense, but I don't think one person does that. Like I think that's much more of collective accountability and collective understanding. And listen again, Indiana can have a perfectly fine season, a better season than last season. Let's just say right now that I'm looking at their schedule. Let's say Indiana goes 8-2 in the Big Ten at home. Let's say they manage to win, 3 out of 4 of Iowa, Northwestern, Penn State, Minnesota away. They'd be 21-10. They'd be 11-9 in the conference. They would be, if we're talking about tournament seeding, they would be fine. If they added, let's say they add a win in the Big Ten tournament, then they'd probably be a 6 seed or better, maybe a 7, but I'd guess probably a 6 or better. They'd be in the tournament comfortably. Given their draw, maybe they'd be even in a position to make a run at the second weekend, and we'd say that's fine, that's okay. But again, this group was happy to raise the bar for itself, and they weren't walking around boasting. They weren't saying, "Oh, come look at us," come and behold us. We are, the future kings of the Big Ten. But they were not afraid of that expectation in the preseason, and I think they are still learning collectively, because this work. I don't think it's just as simple as Trace Jackson Davis pulling everybody together and saying, "Let's stop screwing around now and go get it." When you have problems, for example, with offensive rebounding, that's not one player. When you have a problem with slow starts, that's not one player. Yes, the coach can do better, the staff can do better, the seniors can do better, but there's also got to be a collective understanding of, if we want to win at this level, if we want to win consistently, if we want to be the team that, people talk a lot about, for example, Wisconsin, how all the close games Wisconsin seems to win year after year. Well, part of that's habit. Part of that is understanding, not just one player, but as a collective group, this is what it takes when it matters. This is how we squeeze the extra ounce of blood out of the stone when they can't, when the other team can't. And it goes back again to the idea that like this is a group that's never won at that level before, and that includes the head coach. And obviously, Mike Woodson's done plenty of winning in the NBA. It's a slightly different game in college when you don't have 82 games, you have 20, and first of all, nobody cares about winning their division in the NBA. Like that is not a thing. Right. Second of all, you have a quarter as many games essentially, and so everyone counts. Everyone, the importance of everyone is amplified that much more. And so, is leadership? Yeah, probably. But I think when you say leadership, the problem is people always want things to be reducible to simple terms. And when you say leadership and you say this team needs better leadership, the presumption people want to make is that they don't have any. And sometimes that's true. I don't think this team doesn't have good leaders. I think that this team, I think like for example, Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson are well respected. I think their teammates listen to them. I think Xavier Johnson's in that group too. Obviously he's hurt, and so his role has to be a little bit different right now. But I think he's in that group as well. The other part of it too is like you can't call a players only meeting every time you lose a game by 14 points. Right. You can't, because at some point guys are going to start tuning that out. There's got to be an extent to which you do just, and fans may not want to hear this, but over the course of a long season, there's got to be an extent to which you just shrug off a Kansas and you just say that was just a bad day and we've got to get better and that's not acceptable. But we're not going to sit here 3 weeks later rubbing gravel through our hair talking about how we're still sort of atoning for the Kansas game. But I think that the leadership you're talking about is a little bit more of kind of everybody and is almost more the individual accountability of I'm going to make sure that that I'm bringing what I need to bring so that I'm definitely not the problem essentially. And I've drawn some comparisons to 2016 when James Blackman Jr. tore his ACL before Indiana went on the run that won the Big Ten. And I think a big part of what happened that season wasn't that like people were happy teammates were happy James Blackman Jr. was hurt, but it was not addition by subtraction. But what it was when you took 17.5 points and 48% from behind the 3-point line out of the lineup, suddenly everybody kind of had to have an honest word with themselves and say, there's no security blanket here. I can't look at this and say, well, if I don't do it tonight, someone else will do it for me. I have to go, whatever my role is, whatever my job is, I have to go do it. If I don't do it, we don't have this security blanket of this guy that can just go get 20 when we need him to. And therefore, I got to take it on me to be that much sharper, that much more focused. We're not going to, I don't have to go score all 17 of those points, but if I can score 5 of them and then I can prevent 6 a game at the other end, well, there's 11 points. And if 4 guys do that, 3 or 4 guys do that, then suddenly that's how you turn a season around. And I think that's where I don't think necessarily Xavier Johnson's out for the year, but I think that's kind of part of the mentality Indiana's got to adopt here is, there's no more sort of, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will take care of it. It's got to be like, I'm going to go out every night. Like I'm going to get my job done to the absolute best of my ability. And then I'm going to hold everybody else accountable to do the same thing. And that's how we're going to get better.